Yo, what's up? It is the 101st episode of Tone's Takes. Thank you all for joining me. I am Tony, as you all know, and today I wanted to talk about Reddit. Reddit, the beloved social media platform, which is currently run by the CEO, Steve Huffman, also known as Spez. And I was just reading this article from The Verge, which is titled Reddit CEO Says Racism is Permitted on the Platform. And some users are up in arms, unfortunately. Reddit CEO Steve Huffman has found himself once again embroiled in controversy surrounding his website policy on moderation. In a Reddit thread announcing the platform's 2017 transparency report, findings in which Reddit identified and listed close to 1,000 suspected Russia-linked propaganda accounts. I like this image of Russian ties. You get it? No, you don't? Okay, whatever. I'm not going to waste time on that. That have been banned. 1,000 accounts have been banned according to their latest transparency report. Huffman replied to a straightforward question about the company's rules around hate speech, which is a verbal attack based on race, religion, or another protected class. And the Reddit user chlomyster, I don't know how to pronounce your name, basically said, I need clarification. Is obvious open racism, including slurs against Reddit's rules or not? And Huffman clearly just said, he basically made it a point to say it's not. He basically is saying hate speech is permitted. He writes on Reddit, the way in which we think about speech is to separate behavior from belief. And that's how we all should operate, in my view. From my personal view, this means on Reddit there will be people with beliefs different from your own, sometimes extremely so. And that's true on Reddit, Facebook, every single platform. In the real world, at work, people have views that are different from you. They might not voice them, but Reddit's not your job. YouTube, Facebook, these aren't your workplaces. When users' actions conflict with our content policies, then that's when they take action. So he says our approach to governance is that communities can set appropriate standards, and if you don't know about Reddit, there are sub-communities, basically called subreddits, which are governed by moderators and the like. They can set their own appropriate standards around language for themselves, and many communities have rules like that. So it's a controversial approach, this Verge article says, to say the least, and it has many Reddit users outraged, especially after communities like R the Donald, if you don't know, which is a very right-wing Donald Trump supporting subreddit. Many people in that community apparently participated in the organized event in Charlottesville, which, of course, as many of you know, led to this car attack rolling through the streets of Charlottesville, injuring many and killing Heather Hare in the process. So, again, it's interesting to note Huffman's position on this, especially since, as this article points out, it's been an evolving position. Nearly a decade ago, Huffman's approach to hate speech mirrored that of other social media networks, such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. For instance, Facebook's policies on hate speech are well documented, this article says, and saying something racist will typically lead to some type of disciplinary action, and most of these platforms, it's all the same. And so even Huffman, just 10 years ago or 9 years ago, basically said, I guess I'm a little late to the party, but I banned him. We rarely ban non-spammers, but hate speech used in that context is not something we tolerate. And this is what he wrote about banning someone over hate speech 9 years ago. This isn't any policy change. We've always banned hate speech, and we always will. It's not up for debate. You can bitch and moan all you like, but me and my team aren't going to be responsible for encouraging behaviors that lead to hate. And Huffman wrote that in response to another user in the same thread 9 years ago. So, of course, fast forward the clocks, basically Huffman took over from Ellen Powell, who was pretty much kicked out of Reddit for the platform's toxic and vehement opposition to her leadership, and his approach to hate speech has shifted. And so now what he's saying is basically while my personal views towards bigotry haven't changed, my opinion of what Reddit should do about it has, he wrote 3 years ago, a few weeks after he had returned to lead the company. He said, I don't think we should silence people just because their viewpoints are something we disagree with. There is value in the conversation, and we as a society need to confront these issues. And I completely agree with Huffman here. I mean, there are people that have different viewpoints, and to silence them, to take away a platform which they can at least get the views off of their chest and actually feel like they still have some sort of a community, I think there's some positives to that. One, it helps us to at least know that there are people out there. Instead of living in a bubble or in an echo chamber thinking that everything is fine and dandy, we can actually see that no, there are people out there that do have differences in opinions, and we can actually do something about that. We can either join those communities and try to understand and try to get them to understand what we believe is the right way of thinking, or we can continue to shut ourselves out. It's our decision, but we cannot silence what other people believe, whether it be deep-seated beliefs or whether they just are trying to follow a trend. It needs to continue to be up for discussion. So with that, I completely agree with Spez. So he says, I don't think we should silence people just because their viewpoints are different. There is value in the conversation, and we as a society need to confront these issues. This is an incredibly complex topic, and I'm sure our thinking will continue to evolve. So Reddit still takes hardline stances on calls to violence, which basically let me to write this: hate speech equal good, calls to violence equals bad, and there are other gray areas and other areas that are definitely going to be removed. So in 2015, they removed the fat shaming community, they removed a racist community that was called our Town, and then there were situations that many of us heard about the leaks of celebrity nude photographs, as well as creep shots of underage girls. So there are definitely areas, and those, of course, hurt people directly. If you're releasing images of people, if you are on the shaming thing, again, that's hate speech, which is probably still good, so maybe they shouldn't have taken that away, and I don't know what Coontown was about, but maybe they could have left that as well. But it gets to a point where people on those community pages were actively talking about hurting people, or again, calls to arms and violence and doing things. That's when things need to be taken a little bit more seriously. So Reddit took action against recently this deep fakes community as well. If you don't remember that, it's where basically they're using artificial intelligence generated images to put celebrities on different faces, which really started to make people concerned as they started to put celebrities on porn star bodies, and also a handful of alt-right subreddits and Nazi boards. But each time it does this, Reddit will cite a specific rule, like the use of violent speech, doxing, or the sharing of non-consensual pornography or photography. So when it comes to raw speech, Huffman seems to be more permissive, which stands, of course, in stark contrast to our main man, Mark Zuckerberg, who is currently, on the Hill right now, being grilled over everything that has to do with Facebook. And it's just interesting. The matter for Facebook is especially pressing as ethnic violence in Myanmar has erupted, thanks to organizing and spreading of propaganda on that social network. And Facebook's approach is largely centered on AI. Zuckerberg and his company is increasingly looking to automate algorithms. So I don't know if algorithms are better than having people actually moderate your communities, but I like to think that there's got to be some sort of approach that comes in the middle, where we can actually find a way to better protect people against hate speech and against violent calls to arm. It is interesting to note that there was a study published last year on the banning of those subreddits I mentioned before, Fat People Hate in Coontown. It was basically titled, "You Can't Stay Here," and in that it basically said that, hey, there are clear positive effects to banning these hateful communities. Many of the accounts that were part of that community either discontinued their use of the site on Reddit, and those that stayed active, there was a drastic decrease in their hate speech use. So they ended up going to other subreddits, and either they just tampered down their hateful rhetoric, or they just didn't say anything at all. So again, it's very interesting to see where Spez stands on this. Again, I kind of agree with him. Hate speech is allowed, it's protected under the First Amendment, and rightfully so, because when people have differing views, they should be allowed to share those, and there shouldn't be any, sort of repercussion. Now, we see that there are employers that will take a different stance to that, and rightfully so. They have a reputation to uphold. They are a private firm, and while they, might not be as bound by the Constitution in terms of, hey, I'm a private company, I have to protect my company and how my image is portrayed, and if I have one bad apple, one bad employee who's saying certain things, I can't have that ruining my company's reputation. That's a completely different story. But when it comes to, hey, what you're able to say on a community, even when I talked about Diana Volatage, whatever her name was, who was the teacher in middle school, spewing her stuff, it should be allowable, but it shouldn't be allowed in the school or where you work. And hey, if you get found out to be saying things that are hateful by your employer and they don't like it, they definitely have the right to fire you. So that's where I'll end it. This is a pretty long video, but I would like to end it right there. And just, let me know what you guys think. And do you agree? Do you disagree with Spez? Let me know. But that's all I've got today. I want to play this awesome music from, if you haven't heard, Lil Hank Williams, the Yodeling Kid, with DJ Suede, the remix god, on it. Let's play that, and I will see you all tomorrow.